Yeah, the next order of business is communications from Senator Robert O'Leary, and we have the senator here with us.
Good afternoon. Nice to see some of you. I haven't seen you for a while. Okay, good afternoon. It's nice to see you. Now I know why I'm no longer a county commissioner. Tough job. Yeah. I'd like to keep it rather informal and answer questions and concerns. I know I've been asked to kind of comment on the sheriff's issue. I know that's front and center for the county, and it's an important issue. And I can give you a little background and perspective on that. That bill is coming before a committee of which I'm vice chairman of tomorrow. We have a hearing, I think, tomorrow afternoon at, I think it's 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. On that very bill, the governor's bill. So that's the first time that, that's now moved from, moved from the governor's desk out into the process, and we'll have our first crack at it, so to speak, in the Joint Committee on State Administration. So, and I happen to be the vice chair of that committee, so that puts me in a pretty good spot to have some impact on that process as it goes forward. Understand that there are 6 counties, I believe, that are slated under this legislation. I believe it's 6. I think it's Suffolk, Norfolk, Plymouth, Barnstable, Bristol, Dukes, and Nantucket are all engaged in that bill. Out of them, I have 3 that fall under my, so I have a fairly large stake in the outcome of that bill, and I've been involved in discussions with the governor's office, with the Senate President's office, with the chairman of the various committees that bill will move through, letting them know that I do have a very important interest in the bill and I have some ideas about it. Having said that, unlike, this came up last year near the end, and there have been efforts in the past to do this, and they have not happened. This year, although you never know, there's no way to really sort of predict what will happen and what won't happen. But my sense is there's more of a consensus this year than ever before, and that the probability that the bill will move this year is very high. Not a guarantee. There are no guarantees. But there's more of a probability this year than otherwise. And I'd say that for a couple of reasons. One, clearly the governor's office and the Secretary of A&F, Leslie Kerwin, she clearly has made this something she very much wants to do. And she's got a lot of history with the Sheriff's Department. She was the former chair of the County Finance Review Board, and she's been very heavily involved in these issues over the years. And I know she wants to do this bill. The sheriffs are in agreement. Which is, I don't think that's ever happened before. So there's a consensus among them as well. So that's out of the remaining 6. So there's that sense. Third, I know the Senate President and I have talked about this. I know she wants to do the bill. I have less, the Speaker I think is a bit more of an unknown here. So, because he's new and I'm not sure where he is on this issue. So a lot of the stars are sort of aligning in a row here. And so it might happen. The problem is I couldn't think of a, in a sense from our perspective, I can't think of a worse year in some ways for this to happen than this year, because there's such pressure on the state budget. And, everybody's watching every nickel and dime. And so any kind of transition runs the risk that there might be an effort to, to maximize the state's finances at the expense of the counties or the towns. And that's, I think, really our charge, is to make sure that doesn't happen. And in better years, it would be, my suspicion is it would be something we might be able to do more with more confidence. This year, it'll be a battle, but we will fight it. I promise you that. I have 10 amendments to the current bill that that I'm preparing to sort of offer up. I'm not sure I can rip them all off right now, but I can give you the main ones. But I have 10 amendments around this legislation that I'm interested in moving on. We can talk about those. So I'll stop there.
Okay, do we have any questions for the senator on this? Julia?
Is this going to be a separate bill, or is it part of the budget?
Right now, it's a separate bill, but there are no guarantees. The Senate loves outside sections of the budget as a vehicle to move legislation. So, you know, that can be a way to do this as well. But I don't know. There's no. We're in the first year, so there's no pressure necessarily to do this bill before July. Although I think there'll be a push to do it. You know, usually you see more outside sections when you're in the second year and you're running out of time to make something happen, and so you use whatever vehicles are available to you. To the extent the Senate President is involved in this, that's a vehicle she might use. But again, it's the House is more reluctant to go that way. They're in some ways more respectful of the process than the Senate is in that respect. I don't know. It could go either way. Clearly, if it's not a good bill, if it's a good bill and it's a bill that works for us, and someone offers we would make an effort to do that through the outside section, because again, it's a way of moving something quickly. The dilemma you face in that is you kind of lose some control in conference committee, because then you've got, you know, if it's an outside section then when it's conference, and typically there are differences, you've got basically, you know, you've got people, Ways and Means on both sides making arrangements, and you don't have a lot of control over that, and that's a danger. That's a risk you're running going that way. I don't know yet, Julie. I don't know the answer. It's a good question.
Anyone else for the senator? Any questions here, Tom?
Just on the budget revenues and the way this year's 09 is looking, and then 10. We read that there's another $1 billion that may have to come out of the 09 budget. Is that still your understanding on that?
Well, you know, that information is based on February's revenues, which were very bad. And the chairman of Senate Ways and Means made a prediction, kind of the same trend, if it trends through the balance of this fiscal year, even after the governor's 9C cuts, that we would be close to $1 billion. The offset of that is there's a little bit more federal money coming through in the form of, I think I'm not sure it's Medicaid. Some part of a federal money is coming through, I think $200 million more than they anticipated. So if that's the case, then, you know, we're looking at a shortfall, if again the numbers trend down, to upwards of $800 million. Now, the House chairman had a lower number. He had a $500 million. That's quite a difference. So, you know, I'm not sure. I think a lot of us felt that the governor's budget, even after the 9C cuts, that the governor's cuts after 9C, and I was sort of this mind, hadn't gone far enough, and that we were running the risk of coming in fairly low, which is what seems to be happening. If it's too late in the fiscal year to really make significant cuts in the state budget between now and July 1 that are going to really have a big impact. I mean, there can be some, but it seems to me that we're really running out of time now. So what that means is, even if we make some cuts now, or further 9C cuts, the probability is if that larger number is the case, then that puts us deeper into the reserves, the rainy day fund, and we're getting close to the point of obliterating that. And so that just ricochets into next year. So I think, you know, again, the numbers are moving around, and it's hard to keep track of all these, and it's not my field of expertise. But my overall sense of the state budget is that it's tailing down in a significant way. It's really bad, and it's going to get really bad next year. Really bad. I don't think the towns have quite figured out how bad it's going to be. We're talking, you know, I don't know, $3 billion further cuts, you know, beyond what we're seeing this year, $3 to $4 billion. These numbers are just stunning. Now, what's coming in behind it is federal money, and that we're having our first meeting tomorrow. I'm on this oversight committee, legislative oversight committee. We have our first hearing at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we're going to get our first briefing on, you know, formal briefing on the federal money. There is, you know, some significant federal money coming to the state. In the area I'm most involved in education, I think it's over 2 years, the number I believe is upwards of $1.2 billion. So that's a lot of help. And about, I think, $915 million over 2 years is scheduled to come to backfill operating accounts for the towns in terms of Chapter 70 and higher education, to backfill some of their, that's operating money. So that's going to take some of the sting out of the cuts that have been there and will probably, you know, continue into next year around school funding. So we're hoping that that'll soften some of these impacts. But the numbers are terrible.
Julia?
Possibly a more cheery subject. Thank you very much for the work you did on the funding for wastewater bill.
Had a lot of help from the county.
And could you give a little advice to us and to the towns on television? What should towns be doing right now to mobilize, or any advice for towns on wastewater right now?
This is you know, first I want to thank the role that all of you played in this effort, because you know, this was something that didn't begin with me. Frankly, in some ways, it began with you. It began with the local communities in the county saying, this is an important issue, and we need to do something around this. And you had the good sense to help put together the Water Protection Collaborative, I believe. And if I could put a plug in, you had the absolutely enormous good sense to hire Andrew Gottlieb, who has been, you know, without him, we would not be where we are today. I mean, he has brought a lot of insight to this, and then with the help of Senator Murray, there are a lot of people that congratulate who were able to move that bill last year, and it was a great bill for the Cape, and I think it really sets up a process to begin to deal with what I think is a major financial and environmental and, frankly, you know, growth issue for Cape Cod and the islands. It's just an enormous. This is the right instrument, it seems to me. What's frustrating is that the towns which were moving in this direction are very close to begin doing this. It depends on town to town to town, but they're not quite shovel-ready yet. We're probably a year out on a whole setup of these. It seems to me some towns, Barnstable being one, less so Nantucket, I believe, Orleans is another, that have, quote, shovel-ready projects kind of in the works. Other communities are a year or two, maybe 3 years out on this, maybe a year out. And to the extent they're looking at it, my encouragement would be for them to move as quickly as they can to put together their plan and to begin to get projects up and going that they know they're going to be doing, and they know are going to need to happen at some point and are going to be much more expensive later on than they are now. They need to be doing that anyway, because the legislation set up a window, a 10-year window for projects to go through. You know, 10 years moves fast when you're talking about capital projects, so I think the encouragement is to move quickly. I did write a letter to the governor and around the federal money, because what we're trying to do, and it gets complicated, I'm not sure I understood what I said in the letter, because I had other people help me write it. in other words, Andrew Gottlieb again. But we're trying to make sure that a good portion of this federal relief money that's coming to wastewater doesn't just go out to shovel-ready projects this year, because a lot of them are projects that would not have normally qualified for money, and maybe they wouldn't have qualified because they weren't good projects. And what we're trying to do is get them to push some of this money into the state revolving fund and sort of strengthen that fund so that they can fund projects 2 and 3 and 4 years out. And frankly, there was self-interest here because we feel that our projects, which will be in those years, are need the money, clearly are very good projects, and deserving of funding, and we shouldn't just fritter away the money because the fear was that they would not only write down to zero interest loans on projects, but they would begin to literally put federal money, into principal for what are arguably not good projects elsewhere in the state because they were permitted and shovel ready, even though they didn't make the cut. And it would eat up all the money very quickly when they could actually maximize this federal relief money by putting it into the state revolving fund, broaden that fund, fund more projects over time at zero interest, get a lot more infrastructure of a higher quality over a longer period of time. We think it's a smarter way to spend that federal money. And I think what we're hearing back is, we haven't got an official response because no one knows where this federal money is going yet. We're hearing good word bad, that they heard us and that they're understanding what Andy wrote in the letter and that I signed, and that on balance we might be that there's a kind of a positive response out there. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
A follow-up on that, if I could. You were saying that you're looking at ways of maybe putting some of that money into the revolving account.
Right.
What's the guarantee that that money is going to be there 5 years from now?
Oh, the revolving account is a federal loan program that is solid in the federal budget. And it replaced, decades ago, the federal government used to, fund wastewater projects. Barnstable's original facility, I think, was 90% federal dollars, as I believe. The federal government got out of that business, and they set up this federal revolving fund. And that fund has never, ever been at risk because it's a loan program, and the states it's a partnership between state and federal government, and a lot of that money is that's in that fund now at the state level, and is basically money that's being paid back by betterments on people who have getting the benefits from the projects that were built. So there's money flowing back and forth, and the state basically underwrites the interest rate that's being charged on these through an appropriation in the state budget. But it leverages a lot of federal money, and it just has broad political support from unions. It's short money at the federal level. It maximizes a lot of projects that need to happen at the state and local level. It's just never been at risk. There's never been an effort. It's one of those things that I think you can count on, to the extent you can count on anything in government. I would say it's one of them.
Thank you. Let me ask a question, Rob.
Yeah.
Yesterday the Chatham Board of Selectmen voted to accelerate part of our wastewater project to try to bring it into this next fiscal year in order to take advantage of some of the stimulus money. They were going to the word we got was that they were going to match 25% of our expenditures, which might have been up to 60 million, which would have been 15 million, out of a pot of money that was available for wastewater. Now, there's a lot of this federal stimulus money coming down, and you'd think that those of us who are in the loop would understand it, but unfortunately, we don't, because it's coming in different revenue streams for transportation, and there's a report in the paper this morning that the legislature is dragging its feet on approving some of the stimulus money. So I guess my question is, is this money now available for distribution by, DEP or whoever does it, or is part of it going through the legislature, waiting for legislation?
No, that's not. First of all, what you read in the papers, I think, is, and I must confess, I think all of us, I've been trying to get my head around this, and I honestly am still not there yet. And I am on this committee, this oversight committee that has been set up by it's a joint committee, House and Senate committee, and I've been trying to focus in on the education part of that because that's my major responsibility, and a big part of this money is education. An enormous chunk of it is going to the schools, so I feel like that's where I've spent most of my attention. But we've been talking to every town, trying to get their list of projects, transportation projects, capital projects. We've been reviewing those lists. We also went to the county and asked for regional projects, because it's kind of interesting that some of the, and you can understand how this would happen, towns put together their capital list, but there are Cape-wide issues as well. The Open Cape Cod, for example, which I think is a very important effort. I was down at Woods Hole 2 weeks ago, and I asked them what was the single most important thing that we could do around this, and that was the one they mentioned. It was interesting. That was the one they said that would make more of a difference for us than anything else that you could do. And I thought, well, that's an interesting comment. So we wanted to make sure that those regional efforts, and there were 5 or 6 that jumped out at us. Clearly, in terms of transportation, the whole issue of the study done around the Mid-Cape and with respect to, I think it's the #1 project on the tip list was implementing the what's the word I'm looking for? Hyannis Access Study. So we want to make sure those get on somebody's list. And I also should say to you, what we're hearing back is that that the lists are not closed. The towns were told, get your list in by a certain time, but there's still time. And I would use this opportunity, if you know within your respective communities there are projects that have not been suggested, please let me know, because we want to get as many of those sort of into the mix as possible. So there's that business. Things are coming in. Who decides and how those decisions are made is still not clear to me. In some states, the legislatures are, in fact, kind of doing battle with the governors, which kind of surprises me, because we've been told to date that we have very little role in this. So I read that in the paper today and said, do they know something we don't know? Because we've been told pretty much that this is an executive, that the way the money was passed through to the states, it was largely an executive determination. There were pieces of it that require legislative appropriation. I think some of the health care money does, but most of it does not. So, and that this advisory committee that's been set up, this oversight committee, is more of a conversation than it is a gatekeeper role. The legislature is not blocking any effort by the governor here. Wherever you read that, I'm not aware of that. What we're trying to figure out simply is, how is this process being, how is it being organized, and how do we access it? Because right now what's been going on is the governor's people have been, and there's a learning curve for them. They go down to Washington every week and they get told there's, a different story, and there's more or less money than they were aware of. So they come back up and they've been reaching out to executive agencies and asking them whether it's housing or transportation or, what's out there. And they in turn have been reaching out to towns. It's not clear where our role is in this. I think we're going to hear that tomorrow. We have a first meeting tomorrow with is it the czar of the state czar, Simon, and he is going to tell us what we can and can't do around this. So I'll know more after 10 o'clock tomorrow, I think.
Okay. We'll start with John and then Fred.
Thanks, Mr. Moran. Senator O'Leary, the governor's put forth a literal menagerie of tax proposals. I mean, they're all. Oh,
you want me to comment on those?
No, no.
That wasn't on the list, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Has any one of them gotten any traction yet? I mean, there are some that are just outrageous, and there are some that you could swallow.
Well, obviously there's something you should be aware of, and let me divide this up into thirds, if I could. Clearly, there's a transportation financing crisis and a transportation organizational crisis. We have a transportation system here in Massachusetts and it's independent of the fiscal crisis, the financial crisis. I mean, it goes back to the big dig, and we can talk about who's responsible for what here. But the state's financial transportation system just ran out of room, ran out of gas, I guess is the way to say it. So we need to reform that, and that's been the Senate emphasis. That that the Senate has said, and I give Senator Murray a lot of credit on this. Been clear, and in the legislative process, you kind of know what's over the hill. You know that there's a financial problem, and we got to deal with it. And a financial problem translates into new revenue. But before you get there, you need to talk about leveraging as much of reform in that system as you can. And there are a lot of sacred cows that need to be dealt with. And the governor's bill gets part of the way, but I think there's more room there, honestly. So there's that issue. Once we get through that, and we got to do this quickly. I think this is right on the front burner here. Then the issue of, are there going to be some revenue, are there going to be some tax increases here or toll increases? There's got to be one or the other, or some mix. There's just not enough money in the system. That has got to happen. And the struggle will be geographic. And this puts someone like me in a great kind of dilemma, because from a geographic perspective, I represent a part of the state that has little access to the infrastructure that we're talking about. We don't pay tolls. We live along a long extended corridor where people have to drive to do just about everything. And so a gasoline tax begins to shift more of the burden our way. If you live in the western part, in the western suburbs or on the North Shore, you're looking at toll increases that are politically explosive. And so you're going to be arguing against toll increases. You'll be pushing a tax, a gasoline tax. So this geographic issue will play out. And then the struggle will be between those who have access to mass transit, and we'll be looking for relief there, and those like us who have these regional transportation systems that have been underfunded and budgeted retrospectively, and are unable to provide a lot of service because there's not a lot of revenue there. So it'll be a politically explosive debate. I'm not looking forward to this, and whatever we do will not make many people happy. But I think it's important to understand that in this financial crisis around the transportation system, there's an opportunity to clear out some deadwood here, some old problems that have not been addressed, and we need to get at them quickly. And that's been the message of the Senate in this debate. Senator Murray has been clear on this, and I'm very much supportive of her on this effort, that we need to reform the system. And then at some point, we'll have that fairly quickly after that. We'll have a discussion about revenue, and we all recognize there's going to be a need for revenue. And then the debate will take on a different character. The state budget is, a different matter. That's just free-falling because revenues are falling, as they are across the country. It's not unique to Massachusetts. In some ways, Massachusetts isn't, think if you were in Michigan or California, some of these places are just, this is historic, isn't it? These are historic situations. And, there's obviously a lot, it's getting rather ugly up there, but the reality is the state is going to, have to, I don't know what we're going to do. That, you've heard talk about an increase in the sales tax, you've heard talk about the income tax, you've heard talk about, a sugar tax. Didn't we have a sugar tax? Yeah, that started a revolution. So, there'll be, that conversation's all going to unfold. And I might, can I run for county commissioner again? Is it too late? The other thing you should weigh, the Senate will, the governor has a series of taxes around the hotel motel tax, a meals tax, and God, we're talking taxes here, and also around the short-term summer rental tax. I'm familiar with that one. The Senate will come up with a local option alternative to that, in which the revenues will stay locally. The governor's legislation directs most of that revenue to the state, and there's no local referendum on whether those will be adopted or not. We're going to have a different proposal. We're going to say if there's a meals tax increase, there should be a local option, and some will go to the state and some of it will stay locally. And if there's a hotel-motel increase, it should stay all locally, and there should be a local referendum on these before they happen. You know, I think we're trying to protect the local communities here, give them a right to make a decision about what they want to do, and keep the revenues as best we can here. I mean, the Cape historically has generated a lot of revenue under these particular existing taxes, and most of it has gone to Boston, and some of it comes back, but it comes back in formulas that don't help us as well as they do other parts of the state. In particular, the lottery formula is the one they usually use, and that one doesn't work well for our communities as well as it does for other parts of the state. So we'll try to change those efforts. Whether the House will go along with any of this, I don't know. Remains to be seen.
Thank you, Mr.
I hope the press isn't here. Is the press here?
The press is here. Senator Leary, I have a couple of, one, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the ocean management business,
okay,
if you would. I also, particularly after hearing your fairly dire predictions.
Yeah, I'm pretty much.
Is the legislature doing anything to work in the area of job creation, looking at how this is all going to play out over the next several years, what the unemployment rate is going to be, who is being unemployed in the state, and how we can take advantage of some of the state resources to create jobs? Any programs that way?
Well, you know, obviously the unemployment numbers are up around, over 7% statewide, I believe. They've gone up, I think on the Cape they're close to 10%, I believe. So we're above the state average. Having said that, they're not as bad here as they are in much of the rest of the country. So there is, there's a contraction going on. I don't know, was it $3 trillion in consumer spending? It's just sort of disappeared. So it's really a tough time, and clearly, unlike the federal government, we don't print money, so our revenues are tracking down as the economy contracts. The state's revenues contract, and so we're facing this budget crisis. So it's hard to take on new initiatives. It's virtually impossible, really. Right now, what we're faced with is deciding among what things we do now, which ones we're going to do less of in the future. That's really where we're at. We've cut tons of money out of the state budget, billions of dollars over the last year, and we're going to be faced with that dilemma next year. And the struggle is going to be: do we just continue to cut virtually things out of existence, or do we at some point look at raising some revenues? That will become the debate. Specific job, I don't have a list in my head of all the job programs, but clearly we have, we tried to grow the biotech industry. That's an initiative we've undertaken. We've tried to grow some of the, through the Green Communities Act. We're trying to grow jobs in that area as well. I've been very heavily involved in higher education. That's been and I see that as a key vehicle to create jobs in terms of encouraging students to, grow the university, the colleges, community college, develop programs, help people move into the world of work. I'm not sure. It's a battle, and I don't have a good answer to say, what else are we doing around the job creation areas. I think we have to, focus on getting our fiscal house in order, continue to invest in the things that make sense, in my opinion, education. One of the things we don't get credit for, I mean, this state has, in the last, I don't know, several, 4, 5, 6 years, Massachusetts has the highest ranking in the national testing in English and math. At every level, we're always in the top 2 or 3. I don't know if you're aware of that. And you know, we competed on the international exams, and I think we were in the top 3 internationally. So the state has, you know, since 1994 has been investing in K through 12, and it shows. There is some real progress there. Now there is this gap between, you know, the underperforming schools and the rest of the system, and that's something we need to focus in on. But nonetheless, there's been some real progress there, and I think we should take credit for it. And I think in the end, that's going to serve us in terms of economic development. In my way of thinking, that's the fundamental instrument of economic growth is human capital. And I believe we have to keep our focus on our schools and on our colleges and universities. And if there's any other money on the side, we gotta use that to stimulate parts of the economy that we think have a future. And I think biotechnology and the green industries, renewables are an area where we probably should be investing state money, and we have.
Having just been on vacation in South Beach, I was out clubbing every night. They have a 13% hotel tax and a 9% meals tax, which was a little jolting when you paid it, but, you know, for fun and excitement, what can you say? However, I did want to comment on your talking about the fight over the gas tax versus the toll issues based on geography, and I would like to suggest that if we are going to put any emphasis on a green industry, then we have to raise the gas tax to make it more likely that people are going to need green items. And so I would strongly urge you to support a gas tax despite the geographical problems, because I think it fits more with what we need to be doing in the long term. I also was cheered a little bit when I got some communication from a local person in Falmouth about the Sierra Club's interest in trying to be supportive of wind energy, even if some of their members had been worried about Cape Wind specifically, and trying to have some sort of new dialogue. Today we got a letter in our package from someone who's very upset because the Cape Cod Commission was not doing everything they could to help Cape Wind, and I don't think the writer understands that the Commission was not opposed to Cape Wind, but was opposed to the process of how siting took place. But at any rate, I do hope that since we're a likely spot for wind development, I hope that you and others will work on some sort of zoning procedure that will make our projects happen, but also be specifically beneficial to those communities that host them.
Well,
and I would encourage, I would hope you could be helpful in that as well as others.
I met, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Cape Light Compact, which is a creature of the county, and some of you involved here were involved in creating, has really done a wonderful job in this regard, and is now, we met, they were up to see us last week, and we met with people from DOER, Department of Energy Resources, and from the Department of, I believe, Public Utilities, and also people from the Secretary's Office of Environmental, EOEA, Ian Bowles' office. And the thrust of the meeting was to try to work, there are some regulations that are pending around the Green Communities Act, which requires, as a provision of that law, for communities to qualify as a green community, they have to do I don't know exactly the proper term here, but they essentially have to zone some area of their community for renewables, and in this case, one would expect on the Cape, that would be wind power. And of course, we want to encourage this to qualify and to access some of the funds and some of the benefits that are out there. The Cape Light Compact, I think, is made, and we've been working with them, a powerful argument that the best way to do that on the Cape is regionally, that some towns, just given the constraints they face, some towns have airports that really tie up the town in knots when they try to figure out where to locate something because of FAA regulations. And for a variety of reasons, it's going to be tough for some towns to make the cut, even though they might have a real interest in doing something. But that if we do this regionally, we could really get to a point where we get a lot more windmills than we would otherwise. And so we're trying to get a provision built into those regulations that will allow communities that choose to join, because they can go their own way, but a regional kind of green designation, and that regional entity would qualify as a green community. And I would love to see the whole Cape be a green community, Barnstable County. And we haven't heard back. We're pressuring them to respond favorably. They have some concerns, and their concerns are not about the Cape. It's the classic argument, which is if we do it for you, do we run the risk that other parts of the state will use it as a way of avoiding, pursuing renewables as aggressively as they should? That's their concern. And we're saying, no, don't worry. We'll guarantee that we'll meet the minimum number that would be required under the Green Communities Act and go beyond that as a precondition for a regional designation. So we'll have to see if they're open to that. But that discussion is playing out as we speak. It's an important one.
We were at the last Selectmen and Councilors Association, which I attended, and also Charlotte was there. We spoke to the gentleman who was in charge of the Green Communities Program,
right.
And he was
at the meeting.
And he was given that, the sense of the people in the room at the time, the representative, the Selectmen and Councilors was that exactly what you said, is that it's not possible, because of the nature of our communities, it's not possible to, each town would have to, have their own individual,
yeah.
So and he was polite, but he basically said that the legislation was set up a certain way, so it's going to take an effort on.
Well, we said we can change that.
Yeah.
That's a kind of weak excuse in my opinion, because we can change that. This is not rocket science. We're trying to get windmills out there out on the Commonwealth. We're not trying to make sure that each town has a windmill. What we want to do is make sure that we maximize them. So I think, let's see how that first round plays out. But it would be helpful if you would communicate with the Secretary of EOEA, Ian Bowles. I'm looking at Julie in particular. You know him well. And, press this point a little bit, because that's where the decision is going to be made. And I think we got a powerful argument when you get into it. Maggie Downey, who works for you, does a great job of making this case. If you listen to her, they do a powerful argument, and they've got you've got a lot of talent over there around this issue. So we want a green region.
Okay. Leo, did you have a question?
I had more of a point than a question. I'm pretty active in the farming community, and I'm also a kind of a realist, when I sit and think about how these towers are actually going to be constructed. And quite frankly, a 300-foot tower taking an acre of land on Cape Cod, costing $4 million to put up, is not going to be well received in a lot of neighborhoods across Cape Cod. But there is an answer, and Senator, I want you to hear this, because I've been active through the governor's office in promoting wind power as a use on an agricultural piece of land. Because as Cape Cod is, where they should be is right in the middle of cranberry bogs. There is no fall zone issue, there is no wetlands concerns, because once the foundation of the tower is in place, whether it be pilings or cement, the practice of cranberry farming can continually be done right up to the base of it. The noise aspect of it is probably going to be non-existent, because most cranberry bogs are not surrounded tightly by houses. I mention that because I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not.
No.
And I
That's
hope
good to
that
hear.
I can rely on you now to jump on board as I continue my efforts to get the collection of wind to be really designated as an agricultural practice in the state of Massachusetts. If that happened, I would have a tower on my property within a year. Right now, I have a test tower on my property. It's 260 feet high. There is enough wind there. But the other hurdles that I have to jump through and the other things that I have to get in order to just get that permit in my hand is very time-consuming and very costly.
Okay,
If I could get the state behind me by saying, you know something, we want to see wind towers in the middle of cranberry bogs, I would have developers knocking at my door wanting to buy that 20 by 20 foot piece of property or lease it to put a tower up.
Gotcha.
And you will in fact see them. Because quite frankly, the only other places I think on the Cape you're going to see them is municipalities, land owned by municipalities, probably old capped landfills because they don't have the surrounding communities around them. But other than that, as you mentioned, with the airport, you know, I'm in Harwich. I'm outside the Chatham Airport fly zone, but Hyannis certainly has restrictions with the Hyannis Airport.
Right, absolutely.
I just thank you for listening to that, and I'm going to call you for your support.
Thank you.
All right, we had, Tom, did you?
Yeah, just switching gears, I want to thank you for being a catalyst on helping with the homeless on Main Street and the Main Street Initiative. On Friday, the group of service providers that have put together a model on that have begun direct contact with the 95 individuals that have been identified as needing services and or housing, and we're hoping for success on that. And I know you were helpful with having Lieutenant Governor Murray come down and make his presentation on the grant that is assisting regionally with homeless families and whatever. And I had just heard, and I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but someone told me that the county is actually going to function as the fiduciary agent on that. So I think that's a positive sign that the county's looking at this regionally, and you know, I thank you for helping pull that group together because they seem to be making progress.
All right, glad to hear that.
Anybody else? Fred?
Is one comment on the wind farms. Also, the Cape Cod National Seashore has a lot of great areas where towers could be put up, and so I guess going through the federal government and the Department of Interior to bring them into, because that's a big part of the Cape as well.
Plus MMR is obviously another site.
MMR. Yeah.
And you asked about the Oceans Management Act. I never responded to that, but that we are in the planning. We have had a series of meetings. I'm on the commission. We're putting together a plan. We have a deadline fairly short, I believe. I think it's January of next year, and it has to be complete. I believe that's the date. And so you know, that's we're starting now to get into the real. You know, there's been a lot of sort of esoteric planners. Get them in a room. You think I'm bad. They're brutal, but once you start drawing lines, then I think things are going to get interesting, and we're just about there where that's going to start happening.
Okay, George, did you have a comment? And then we're going to have to.
Rob, you said a few minutes ago you were interested in increasing employment and education.
Yeah.
I suggest you adopt the Provincetown model. They have 90 people working in the school system to take care of 200 people. maybe they'll franchise.
Yeah, that's.
On the gas tax and tolls, for a long time I've noticed that the state subsidizes the MBTA heavily.
Yeah.
From general revenues.
Correct.
Isn't that part of the equation? We don't, I think.
It is.
For the most part, don't use the MBTA.
Right.
And yet we're paying for the MBTA for the benefit of the people.
Oh, there's no question about it.
2.5 million people around Boston.
Right. There's no question that is part of your contribution to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And of course, there are problems inside the MBTA. I mean, some of them that really need to be addressed. You know, personnel issues. You know, we're all pretty aware of those. Anybody who reads the paper knows there are problems there that need to be worked on. And And clearly the regional transit authorities, of which we are a part, have really been the poor stepchilds of that whole system. That we don't get very much money. They've really been, and they're after the fact. They're not forward funded, and so there's no real predictability about what they're going to have for revenue. It's a bizarre system that doesn't work, and we had a crisis last year. Now the MBTA used to work like that, and then the legislature had the good sense to change it and at least make that a budgetary system where they were given a certain amount of money and that was it. But they didn't do that for the regional transit agencies. Any transportation bill that goes through, the group of us who are organized, and Stan Rosenberg has been kind of the leader on this, as you know, we're going to pounce on that, in terms of trying to at least put the RTA in a reasonably decent position relative to across the state, all the RTAs, in a fiscally sound situation, which they're not in now. And that'll be something that'll be part of it.
Any other question? One other question I'd like to ask you, Bob, is that the towns were hit with a series of 9C cuts from the governor, and I know you gave a somewhat a pessimistic view of the future.
Next year, next year's going to be worse.
But I guess the question really remains is not what, regardless of what revenues, is that, of course, we all budget, including the county, budget now for the entire fiscal year, and then 9C cuts can hit us in halfway through the fiscal year. Do you think, is it your sense that the legislature will budget very conservatively so as not to hit the towns and the county with unexpected cuts in the middle of the fiscal year, or do you think that we might be faced with the same? I know you're predicting the future, but
I think the big unknown here is how deep this this economic slowdown is, and to what extent the federal, the two big unknowns, will the financial markets kind of finally stabilize, how can you function without banks that, can make, so that has to be fixed, and of course they're trying to do it, and you can see the mess. I don't know if anybody understands it, and it's not, but at some point that has to be cleared up. There's no recovery without it. And then the second piece is how much of the stimulus money, how much, is that going to start to turn this thing around? And, you can tell a sort of positive spin message is now the order of the day. 2 weeks ago, it was pretty doom and gloom, and then about a week ago, you could almost see like someone turned a switch, and suddenly the treasurer and the president and the chairman of the Federal Reserve, they're all saying the same thing, which is, this is bad, but we're bottoming out, and in a year from now we'll see a recovery. I don't know if they're right, then things will start to bottom out and turn around, and state revenues will probably stop declining, but. The other possibility is that this thing just, they don't get a handle on it, and this thing continues to spiral downwards. If that happens, I think all bets are off. So you can tell I'm in a fairly negative mode over all of this. I think we've got a terrible budget coming up this spring. I think when you see what we're going to do to you next year, you're not going to want to vote for any one of us. It's just the reality of what we face. This is a really, when you look at the decline in home values, in people's retirement benefits, I had a friend go over to the mall and say Friday night there was no one over there. You can see it. It's palpable. Things have slowed down a lot, and I'm just hopeful that the Cape as a region, because of the tourist industry and the way it's set up, might not feel this as much this summer because people will go local, and that might keep us going. But I don't know. I wouldn't guarantee that next year we wouldn't do a budget, raise some taxes, cut a lot of programs, be very unpopular, get 3 or 4 months into the year and go, oops, and here we come again. I wouldn't rule that out.
Okay, well, I thank you on behalf of the Assembly.
For that?
For your candor. I mean, it's better to be realistic and
Yeah.
than be.
I hope I'm wrong on this. I really, truly hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I also thank you for coming before us. And
All right,
getting-
yeah, I'm not coming back after
know
this, I'll tell you that. But good luck, see you later, thanks.
And we think that all the problems that we're facing now was the responsibility of previous
all
boards
someone
of
else's
commissioners. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.